Right now we only have one avenue of stream, or we only have one gameplay stream available to us, right? Which is the story and the mirror dungeons, right? Now, Project Moon understands that this structure of gameplay is not sustainable for a gacha game. Unless they are pumping out story updates every week or every other week, their expectation is that the mirror option here is going to retain the player's interest. Either they're going to engage with the mirror dungeons by doing one dungeon a day in order to take advantage of the weekly rewards that they earn, or they're going to, if you're a more fervent fan, engage in the mirror dungeon content more often. Um, they're going to be performing the same content over and over again, and this leads to a risk of burnout within the character, or within the players. So this story content here is it isn't repetitive. It is sort of a one and done experience. This is the peak structure, or the peak piece of entertainment that a player is going to be interested in if they are a devout PM fan, right? So story would, the positive for this would be that this is like the premium content that people are going into this game for. And the mirror dungeon is supposed to be a fun repetitive alternative to whatever mechanical gameplay you perform in the story. So fun and repetitive. And at the moment, the game has been out for a little bit, right? And we can see that the mirror dungeons have a flow to them I talked about last stream that isn't engaging until you get to the third floor, because the first floor of the mirror dungeon, you already have 3 of your possible 5 units built for a team. There's already a synergy there, and the enemies are starting at a lower level than you when you enter into the game. So you're building up your units at a faster rate than the enemy can provide you with a difficult encounter. And this remains the case from the first floor all the way to the beginning of the third floor, depending on your maneuvers through the mirror map. I will probably talk about this when we reach the actual dungeon stage, but I just want to get my thoughts out on this now. PM has already seen that this is an issue, because if the mirror dungeon is the only form of content that players are engaging with, they're going to find this mode of play very tiresome over time. Obviously, it's supposed to be repetitive. So they are planning to introduce thread dungeons, or threaded content, where you acquire thread content. And they are introducing XP content, right? XP content. So this isn't introduced yet, but this is meant to separate what the mirror dungeon is currently supplying the population with. The mirror dungeon supplies us with the threads that we need in order to, the ego shards that we need to create threads in order to upgrade our units, and the XP tickets necessary in order to handle the later content in the game. Really, it would be the story content, because there's no other avenue for our upgraded characters to influence the game at all, right? So But why did PM separate these two? Well, for one, they want to have a different form of game engagement that isn't directly tied to the mirror dungeon, because mirror dungeons are time intensive, right? The thread content that they're introducing into the game is, where is it here? Experience Luxcavation and Thread Luxcavation. The Thread Luxcavation is, we fight egos or abominations, right? Or abnormalities. There we go. So we are separating our mode of play towards the abnormality fights. And these would be fighting the, for example, an early one would be the golden apple, right? We would fight the golden apple in this content, and it is one abnormality fight per day. We would acquire our threaded content, or our ego shards in this location, and then we would continue. Think the world bosses. Are they considered world bosses? The premium bosses in Genshin Impact. The wolf, for example, right? Or the Animo bird. I don't know their name specifically. They're this, right? We're trying to diversify our gameplay loop so that we do not get bored of the core end game engagement in the mirror dungeon. We separated our threaded content towards specifically one abnormality fight per day, and the XP content is going to be like a random assortment of human fights that carry over from story to story. They stated this because they are going to reduce the amount of times that we need to do our mirror dungeons in order to acquire material from the mirror dungeons. I would say that this is a false comparison. They're giving us a chance to acquire lunacy with the mirror dungeons, but we have just separated our dungeon time towards the threaded content and the XP content. Because if everything is localized into the mirror dungeon, you're performing maybe 1 or 2 mirror dungeons a day, collecting your 10 tickets, eventually 3 tickets per, or 5 tickets per, 5 tickets of gold and silver, and you're collecting ego shards with the first 5 dungeons that you go into. You don't collect any additional ego shards after that. Now we have to contend with 3 mirror dungeons plus 5 of the threaded excavation content, plus an additional, what is it, 3 XP content, and this is 3 times per day. So this is 3 times per 7 days a week, right? Which would be, it equals what, 21? Yes, 21. So they're giving us more avenues to acquire our tickets and our threaded content, but it's not to lower the amount of time that we're playing the game. This is exponentially increasing the amount of time that we're engaged, which is good. They want to have people engaged in their game for as long as possible, and they are doing this with the limited mechanisms that they have available. Now, why am I talking about this? They recently released information that they are planning to provide a new avenue of play that is outside of this current mechanism, which would be the refraction railway. Refraction railway. Now, the refraction railway is unique in that it is the only other piece of content that you can play right now that is affected by levels. What do I mean by this? Well, the story content is affected by the levels of our characters. Right now, actually, I'm currently grinding mirror dungeons in order to get my core group to level 30 in order to handle the final dungeon in our story content. It is story chapter 3-22, right? This refraction railway is going to also be affected by the levels of our units. So that means that they're going to want us to engage in our XP content and in our mirror and threaded content to diversify our group of sinners and have strong sinners to contend with the challenges in the refraction railway. Specifically, if I can read directly from their press kit here. Greetings, dear manager. In an update projected for early April of 2023, the content of Refraction Railway Line 1 will be added to the game. Recommended level of entry is 30. So they're already giving us the incentive to start engaging and collecting XP tickets as quickly as possible in order to engage in what is going to be the endgame content that they want players to engage with. Refraction Railway Line 1 is a dungeon where you fight through specific encounters for various weekly rewards. In this content, your identity's current levels, uptie tiers, as well as the thread spin tiers of your egos will be carried in, as opposed to standard mirror dungeons. Refraction Railway Line 1 will serve as part of the endgame content for Season 1. In Refraction Railway Line 1, players will be challenged to strategize and build an optimal team out of the identities and egos they've collected and leveled to travel as far as they can, with corresponding rewards awaiting them. We intend to design high difficulty content in which you can test the limits of your identities and ego that have been built up and strengthened through mirror dungeons and excavations. Unlike the mirror dungeons that had roguelite elements, Refraction Railroad Line 1 is static. We plan to mix up its composition every month. This dungeon will purely consist of combat encounters against regular foes and abnormalities, with no events or ego gifts along the route. Entering costs and Enkephalin module after first entering the dungeon will be freely accessible for the rest of the week. You will choose a number of identities and ego to begin the expedition with. The dungeon consists of 13 combat encounters with progressively increasing difficulty. The enemy composition of each encounter is predetermined. The encounters will change every month. The HP and SP of your sinners will carry over between encounters. After clearing a number of encounters, a special event will occur to let you choose between healing your sinners or giving them buffs. If you lose a battle, your progress will be reset, and you may challenge the railway again from the beginning. Now, the listed adjustments are under development and are subject to change, so these are not finalized pieces of information. My initial thoughts on the Refraction Railway is that this is good endgame content, right? So this is good endgame content. But I feel like they're shooting themselves in the foot by not addressing something else that can be done with the game that would be possible with the current mechanisms that they have, which is focusing on the importance of these mirror dungeons. So, what do I mean by this exactly? If the importance of the Refraction Railway is to test the capacity for our players to build teams to take on whatever specific challenge or composition the enemy or PM poses to us, then I believe that the mirrors or theme is to test our adaptability when facing off against challenges that are unknown to us. So this is supposed to test adaptability. And at the moment, it is not doing that function. Right now, what it is testing is it is testing our ability to create an initial team composition that we can maintain throughout the entire dungeon with the ego gifts that we're given, right? For example, when I start my encounter, I am given 3 ego gifts, and of the 3 ego gifts, I am going to choose the 3 ego gifts that best coincide with the characters that I have already provided up tiers to. Because characters that are up tiered, or up tiered to 3 specifically, are always going to be better than any other identity. So I would not focus on creating a composition with a tier 1 She Ishmael, for example. I would focus on the core team that I've been carrying through the story content, right? So I'm carrying something like... I'm typically carrying something like Gregor, Rodion, Sinclair, these characters, right? Because I am carrying these characters through this content, I do not have to care about testing my adaptability. The adaptability that I'm being tested on is at best checking whether or not I'm going to nodes that offer sinners. So, nodes. Nodes that offer sinners, and really ego gifts, right? I would argue that the ego gifts that are available in the game are generalized enough that we don't really need to care about this option, and we mostly care about getting at least a party of 5 available, at most a party of 4, core units that synergize well with one another in order to beat stage 3 of the dungeon, which is the strongest stage that you need to overcome. And I think that PM can go about differentiating the different themes of the content that they have available towards the challenges that they're trying to test. If this is supposed to test for challenge with the units that we have available and incentivize our ability to create competent team compositions, I want Project Moon to add a second form of this mirror dungeon, or maybe change how the mirror dungeon functions itself by including 2 key features. The first key feature, and one that would probably get a lot of, well, it might not even get a lot of blowback from the community outright, because the game is so new. They are allowed to transform their features. I mean, they're fundamentally changing what the mirror dungeon is going to provide, like next week. So the first thing that I would want is I would want to have our character selection be limited to 1 unit. Now, the reasons why I want this limited to 1 unit is because, let's do something like... So the reason why I want this limited to 1 unit is that now there are 4 units that need to be filled, which requires us to adapt 4 units, 4 random units require us to adapt our team composition to what is offered. This is very important if we're trying to emphasize the roguelite elements of the game. The ego gift that we're using, the ego gifts that were provided, the nodes that we're going through, they are meant to accentuate a variation in our team composition. And I find that the game gets more boring with the mirrors if you have the ability to choose the same 3 units to begin with. 3 units is enough in order to create a coherent team identity that you can then sort of ignore the other 2 units so long as they have enough of the same colors as you need. They're superfluous. They're not treated as important. They're not part of the core group identity unless you have a strong synergy with them. So limiting this to 1 unit at the beginning of the floor and having it so that the first floor is just a couple of nodes where you're going to acquire additional units. Maybe have the player choose if they want to have more ego gifts at the start of the run, or if they want to have an additional unit present something along the lines of choice A. Choice A can be 2 units, or choice B is 1 additional unit plus 1 ego, or 1 ego gift. This would provide additional replayability, and if we're thinking of this from a bottom line perspective, this will incentivize the number 2 want here, which is IDs being important. Now, PM has stated that they are not interested in commercializing their gacha system to a great extent. However, I think that the IDs in the game are being underutilized. And what I mean by this is, if this is supposed to test our adaptability, what better way to test the adaptability of our unit than by presenting us with, let's say it is a... They present us with a choice that is 1 unit with 3 identities. This could be something that they can adjust later in the game, where an event allows us to gain access to an identity that we wouldn't otherwise have. It would be treated as a up-tiered identity. So for example, if I have Ryoshu, I don't have her tier 3 unit or her tier 3 identity. I just have her 7 and her base. I would get an event that gives me Ryoshu, and it would select, hey, you can choose between base, 7, or this third option. This is probably going to be something that they can do once they start releasing enough identities for the characters, right? I am glad that you're attending these late night classes that I'm providing here, Christian. I've been thinking a lot about this game and how best to have the players, or how best we can mix the incentive structure for PM to create more content that is engaging for the audience, and for the audience not to get bored over time. Because I'm comparing it to a gacha like Genshin, and Genshin has multiple ways of engaging their players. If we think of how Genshin engages their players by providing them with exploratory elements, right? Going around and collecting chests plus secrets, right? And then we have the dungeons that they can do. These dungeons being to acquire artifacts for their characters. We have the actual the actual quests themselves, which would be our stories for Limbus Company, right? Quests. And then we have dailies, right? There are different methods for the player to engage with the Genshin gameplay. And the Genshin gameplay remains the same. It is, use your preferred units to fight. But this, the amount of time that it takes for you to explore a given location is going to be lower in the amount of time that you have to invest into this over something like investing an hour towards this mirror dungeon. Because that's typically how long it's going to take, just by virtue of how the the by virtue of how the game exists, right? I want PM to consider the various methods of gameplay that they have available to them. And if they are invested in the story structure, I want them to give the same consideration to the challenges that they're trying to present in the mirror dungeons and in the threaded content that they're going to be releasing soon and in the EXP content, right? Because right now, the threaded content is just performing the abnormality fights that you can find at the end of the mirror dungeon. The XP content is the same as what you can do by repeating stages in the story content. Really, the only incentives on doing mirror threaded or XP content for us at the moment is the rewards that we're going to be acquiring. The Refraction Railway is not something that we're going to be experiencing until April. So this is a long way away for us to experience something new with the systems that they have available. These changes can be something that PM can consider in order to emphasize the importance of that adaptive roguelite appeal, right? I've played a number of roguelites. I've talked a lot about roguelites on my channel, and one of the emphasis or the important thing about having a roguelite is to stress the adaptability of a player. And at the moment, there's just not a lot of adaptability to engage with in the game currently. The game is new. The game has the capacity to change. So I am not perturbed by the idea that they will screw it up. I have faith in PM. I'm almost certain that they're going to consider changes to their model of play. I am just voicing my thoughts at the moment and what they are.